Okay, thank you all for following directions so well and coming back in for this last session. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Deborah Kobus, who's a senior fellow here at the Urban Institute. So glad to be working with her and excited for this conversation. So please take it away.
Thank you so much, Zach. And thank you all for sticking through the whole morning. Really excited to have all of you here. I've learned a lot already this morning, and I'm really excited to close it out and learn a little bit more about, where we see apprenticeship going from the perspective of the federal government. So welcome to Robin Fernkiss, who's the Acting Deputy Administrator of the Office of Apprenticeship at the U.S. Department of Labor, and Dave Langdon, who is the Deputy Director of Policy and Strategic Planning at the U.S. Department of Commerce. So thank you both for joining us this morning, and I think this concluding discussion really shows how there's excitement not just from the Department of Labor, where apprenticeship has lived for so long, but we're really starting to see that apprenticeship has relevance across the many different agencies and departments at the federal government, and that part of that is because we're seeing that interest from all over the country and all different types of organizations. So really looking forward to hearing from both of you. And we've heard a number of times already this morning that this is the 10th National Apprenticeship Week, and we have this visioning just for another 5 years or so. But I'd like to take advantage of the fact that we're at this 10-year mark and really think about, what have we seen that looks different? We've seen a lot of major growth in the system that people have talked about, and that includes a much broader range of industries and occupations that are served by apprenticeship. The apprenticeship system still has a ways to go, but does look a lot more like our workforce overall and like our communities than it did 10 years ago. There's been the launch of youth apprenticeship programs and a lot of growth over even just the last couple of years in really serving young people in more ways and connecting to high school programming as well. And we've seen greater variation in program designs, right? Some apprenticeships are now closer to a year than 4 to 6 years. We have competency-based programs and other design innovations. So, in many ways, registered apprenticeship looks a lot different than it did when National Apprenticeship Week launched. So I would love to just start at that big picture. Like if we have reflected on what's happened over the past 10 years, what do we really want to see, and might we see 10 years from now? And are there any things that would really surprise us, right? Just like 10 years ago, we wouldn't have, I think, guessed about youth apprenticeship programs, for example. Are there things that people would find surprising about registered apprenticeship 10 years from now? So Robin, I'll start with you.
Great. Well, I want to start first by thanking Urban Institute for this wonderful event, but also acknowledging that I have a lot of colleagues in the room from the Office of Apprenticeship, and they are truly the experts in the field. And so I hope that I can do a good job this morning of representing some of that wisdom that they have. So I think, in thinking forward, it's kind of an awkward time for us a little bit in terms of in the short term, we have a lot of questions, I guess, or uncertainty about where we're going. But if you look at kind of the longer arc of the modernization efforts that we've been doing, and you were reflecting, what's happened over the last 10 years, I think, 10 years from now, we really, well, I guess 5 years, but we'll look out 10 years. We do really think that we're going to have a larger, more, a larger system of apprenticeship, more mainstream, that apprenticeships will be more of a mainstream career pathway, and that it's going to be more prevalent across all of the industries in the country. So that's, I would say, our vision. I think to get there, I think we need more meaningful incentives for employers to participate. So building on what was in the Inflation Reduction Act and, seeing that really increase is going to be critical. I think to get to apprenticeship across all industries, again, those incentives will help do that. But I think it's, looking to, like, we have hit this critical milestone where we have more apprenticeships now outside of construction than we do in construction. And so, figuring out how we engage industries, like as a sector initiative. And then really, as I said, looking at registered apprenticeship as a mainstream career pathway. So that's really, I think, as this expands, young people are really looking at this and seeing that this is a viable, and I think Josh is right, not alternative, but it really is a viable pathway for them to go into. And then I think near and dear to my heart, coming from the Office of Workforce Investment at the Department of Labor, is really system alignment and really wanting to see more colleges become apprenticeship sponsors, but also seeing workforce boards becoming sponsors and serving as intermediaries to support employers. And then I think finally just seeing a more mature ecosystem for registered apprenticeship. And I think we've seen that evolve, and we will hopefully see that continue.
Great, thank you. Dave, I'd like to ask you the same question. What do you hope to see or expect to see over the next 10 years in apprenticeship?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here, and congratulations to you and to Zach for the national standards, the library. And thinking about that, I knew that you aren't feds because there was no acronyms. So I'll throw out there that the Registered Apprenticeship Standards Library, you could call it RASL, and that would.
And we need a dazzle.
You need
too.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, but seriously, this is exactly what we need to sort of advance the system. But for me, like 10 years, I sort of have a micro indicator for what I think would be a macro change. And my micro indicator would be my own family and my two daughters. I have one in college, two juniors. I got junior, high school junior, college junior. Registered apprenticeships was just not a serious option for either of them. And like I've been dabbling in this policy space for a long time. To me, success is when it's actually like an actual option that we think about as their parents, they think about, their teachers are promoting, their career counselors are promoting. So when we hit that point, for me and for all of you, that's success for 10 years from now. And then how do we get there? We've made a lot of advances. We've done a lot in the last few years in terms of new investments, particularly in our department. Registered apprenticeships have been a key part of this. Work-based learning is a key part of our approach. I think it's sort of a bipartisan aspect of training is that it's employer-led and worker-centered. Our signature employer-led worker-centered programs is a sectoral partnership program, the Good Jobs Challenge. 1/4 of the placements in that so far are actually in registered apprenticeships, which is pretty impressive. We'd love to see more of that, and hopefully we will. There's been really smart investments by the Department of Labor, including your all's work. So I think the pieces are coming together. But there's so much more really we need to do.
That's great. So I'd like to stick with you. Again, it's great to hear about what's happening with the Good Jobs Challenge and things that are happening today. There really does seem to be this momentum around apprenticeship across agencies and really bringing apprenticeship into your strategies. So, and Commerce has been one of the leaders in that momentum. What is an example, and maybe it's drawing out Good Jobs Challenge or something else, but where you've really been working in partnership with Department of Labor on apprenticeship or, lessons that you've learned that could continue to build for future partnerships?
It's funny, we were just like in the green room, we were actually hatching, as you were there, hatching a new partnership with Robin we're going to work on afterwards on the foreign direct investment side. But I mean, we've been working, I think one consistency between the last few administrations is from the leadership down to the worker bee level, a lot of interagency collaboration. And it's easy for people to come into the federal government or come into our agency and say, oh, we're going to fix things and make everybody work together. It's like, well, we already are. I mean, there's always new opportunities. But specifically, I mean, there are systems in place that we are connected to in our workforce programs, our funding programs, our business promotion, our workforce investment promotion programs that are there, but there's more that we certainly can do. What I do see on the ground is actually literally like a lot of excitement about registered apprenticeships. So I think there were some references already to the CHIPS programs. We've made 2 announcements in the last week of actual like funding awards where registered apprenticeships are a big part of it for manufacturing and construction, and it's real. I was in upstate New York about a month ago for one of these workforce hub meetings, and it's a whole separate thing. But we basically bring a bunch of stakeholders like this in the room talking around what's needed to support what's literally transformative investments around Syracuse. And we didn't plant this at all. It just organically came out that registered apprenticeships was a massive part of it. It really was on everybody's tongue, and pre-apprenticeships as well. And that was because of interest in the companies, so because of state investments in the state of New York that they're on pre-apprenticeships, and then some of our money has been coming to the table to advance it as well. So there's gonna be a lot of lessons learned here, and then how we sort of build that in sort of more consistent funding, whether it's like, I think would be, remains to be seen.
Yeah, great. And Robin, sort of expanding on that, commerce is one example of the kinds of partnerships that you've been building across the federal government. You mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act and, you know, partnership with Treasury on what tax credits might look like. What are some other really leading examples that you see with partnerships, and how do you see Department of Labor continuing to build new partnerships across the federal government?
Sure. So I think one of the things that really gave some structure to this and was the executive order that this administration passed in March of this year. And this was to expand and scale apprenticeships. And so I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that, but it brought together, you know, through a formal interagency working group, all of these federal agencies, or you know, and so it wasn't just looking at like how can we grow apprenticeships in the federal workspace, but you know, looking at that as an important factor of this. But then how can we look at procurement systems? How can we look at our grant programs across these different agencies? And so I think that really gave this a real boost and an accelerant. And so I think, you know, when you look at, I think right now we're at 116,000 total federal apprenticeships. A lot of those are the U.S. military apprenticeships. But I think we're going to see, you know, continued growth in that. We just this week signed a agreement with the USDA Agricultural Marketing Student Enrichment Apprenticeship Program. So that's a mouthful.
There's an
But it was-
acronym in there for you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
certainly.
sure there is. I don't know the acronym, but it was announced this week at Tuskegee University, and it was part of National Apprenticeship Week. So we're pretty excited about that. And I do think, you know, we're continuing to hold conversations with other agencies too. But I think the future of this work, I mean, I really think we can, as one of my colleagues said, you know, really widen the aperture of this and see, you know, growth of public service, you know, apprenticeships at the state and local levels as well. So,
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations on the new program. And you just mentioned at the conclusion of that remark, you know, the value of states and local governments as well. And in the registered apprenticeship system, states have had a really critical role, and that looks a little bit different from state to state, but regardless of where you are in the country, you know, states play a key role, and Department of Labor has really recognized that and increasingly invested in state systems. So it would be great to hear a little bit more about what you see as the role of states and how you envision continuing to support them in the growth of apprenticeship.
oh, I didn't
Was
know
that-
that was to
Yeah,
me.
I think it's more for you
Yeah.
than me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I think that, you know, from where we sit, it's like definitely the investments that we've gotten, the federal investments have helped, you know, with the states in terms of building out that capacity to be able to focus on this. But so I do think that that's probably a key strategy right now is, you know, and hopefully we'll continue to enjoy those investments. So I would say that, and I mean, as everyone knows, we have a pretty big infrastructure of both our federal staff as well as our state apprenticeship staff who are out there, you know, on the ground and helping individual employers as well as state governments and others. So
Great. And Dave, you mentioned a little bit the partnership with states, but also the key role that employers are playing. So I think both of you interact quite a bit with employers. What have you seen over the last couple of years in terms of how employers are really changing how they're talking about their talent needs, their role in developing talent, and then how that links back to the role of apprenticeships?
So I mean, I think and I think we can do much better on this, and I think the next 4 years will probably see even more of this, is like sort of an elevation of the employer role in training. Just a recognition that employers are, I mean, the apprenticeships is the maximum example of it, right? But it's not a federal program, right? I always, sometimes when I get very cantankerous, I'll say, look, this is like an optional program for companies, right? Nobody's forcing them to do this, they want to do it. And let's make it easy for them. And I think, but elevating that role and how their investments sort of pair with federal investments or state investments is really, really important. I think being very clear-eyed about that is really, really essential.
And do you have thoughts on sort of how apprenticeships should continue to evolve to meet the evolving needs of employers? And also one thing just to note here is also the dual role that apprenticeship plays in helping prepare new talent for employers, as well as upskilling incumbent workers to continue to meet the needs within a company.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that, like some of the things that I think we're hearing, that I'm sure you're hearing as well, is that, these employers really want flexible training programs, and they really need a way to keep up with the speed of the changing technologies and diverse talent needs. I mean, I understand what Josh is saying this morning. It's like this has always been a factor, but I think maybe the acceleration of change has really, it's driving a lot of this. So I do think one area where we're seeing some change, and maybe that's partly because we're also putting some investments there too, is seeing employers come together and really address this either across a sector or within an economic region. And so we have funded our apprenticeship hubs to bring together those ecosystems within an industry sector. And so I think that's probably, we're going to see more of that type of approach, as opposed to just trying to address individual employer needs it's one at a time.
Great, thank you. Well, we've had a really full morning, and you both have been here listening and also been at National Apprenticeship Week events throughout the week. So I want to just step back and open it up and hear if you have any reflections on what you've heard today or this week, or sort of advice we should all take moving forward from here. Dave, starting with you. So
it reminds me, I've had a lot of I'm treated a little bit like Yoda in my office because I work with a lot of younger people, but I feel more like Grogu, if you know, like the Star Wars reference. But we're the same age group, actually. But a lot of just talking, what's coming next, and you've seen everything, and I haven't, and we don't know what's coming next. But there is, there's sort of a consistent wave pushing us towards other training models. Somewhat's widening the scope of what we understand apprenticeships to be, which is one of the big changes I've seen over the last 10 years. Just the idea of apprenticeships for incumbent workers is really, really cool. Our European partners, I think blows some of their minds. But actually, I've been reading up, just spent a lot of time in Politico, a lot of time in Access this week, as I'm sure a lot of you do. And our incoming secretary, the nominee, talked about surfer's theory. And I thought, well, this is really interesting, and it sort of applies to this. And he basically said, you see a really, really big wave, you keep surfing, keep going forward, and you don't look back. And that, to me, really actually, especially if all of you as leaders in your states or in your areas, there's a huge apprenticeship wave here. You can, you should ride it. And we, that's the message I try to give everybody, and myself.
Great, and Robin?
I love that analogy, so that's great. I was going to say, I don't have anything as fun as that, but I was going to say, in general, I think we just want to see more of these models, more of these options, and more on-ramps, because I do think, particularly talking about the pre-apprenticeship, we are seeing that this is really helping youth, go into registered apprenticeships. And so I think, from our vantage point, looking at growing models, our youth build programs, our Job Corps programs, the career technical education centers, and really expanding what we can do with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I was sorry to miss out on some of the comments there, but I really do think getting the workforce boards more engaged in this is going to make a huge difference. So hoping to get on that wing with you. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you both so much. You know, I think that you both reflect the fact that apprenticeship is not a program that's delivered in isolation, right? You both are really embodying not only individual programs that require partners, but that spirit of partnership that can carry us forward. And I've been thinking, this is a little bit to what you were saying about your kids. I've been thinking a little bit this week about, I have a 10-year-old who reads, if any of you have kids, the Warriors Cats books are wildly popular among kids, and they're generally super boring. But my kid was explaining all these things to me, and the system of these 50-plus books, the cats start off as kits, and then they become apprentices, and then they go on to whatever their adult occupation is going to be. And so as I hear about this, my kid is telling me, and then their mentor does this, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I really think apprenticeships, you know, sometimes we talk about how to simplify them and what Urban's role, you know, has been in the occupational standards and what all the centers of excellence are doing to make it easier. But I do think like a 10-year-old can understand the idea and design of apprenticeship, and the concept is really simple and really powerful. And so really appreciate the power of the government and so many partners around the table really focusing in on what is the core of that message and how do we bring that to more people. So thank you so much. And I think Zach is going to close us out. So thanks again.
Well, we've held you longer than we asked you to, but we just thank you, especially thank you to the Department of Labor, thank you to Google for helping put on this event. So happy to be celebrating this 10th anniversary, a decade, wow. Yeah, please be in touch with us as we move forward into the next administration and the next 10 years of registered apprenticeship. All right, y'all have a great week.